Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. And today, I have an inspiring story as I am joined by author Jean Johnson. Jean has a children's book series, so she's going to be talking about that, and she's going to be talking about how, her multicultural raising contributes to her children's book, and we're going to be talking to her about everything that she's up to. She's from Mexico, but she speaks perfect English, and she'll tell you why. So, Jean, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Curtis. It's so wonderful to be here. It's so great to be able to talk to you and share a little bit about my books.
Well, why don't you start off by sharing a little bit about yourself first?
All right. Well, let's just jump right on in. Hello, everybody. My name is Jean Johnson. I am the author of Renny's Adventures. I was raised in the Yucatan jungle, and so therefore, a lot of the animals that I talk about in my books, I actually talk about them firsthand because I had them as pets. My dad was a little bit of like a crocodile Dundee. And so anytime in the jungle when we would find a little animal that was hurt or didn't have its mama or something like that, Daddy would always bring these little animals home. And so me and my sister and a few of my brothers, when they'd come to visit, we would always nurse them back to health. We had all kinds of animals, including anteaters, toucans, jaguars, ocelots. I could go on and on. One of my brothers even nursed a little hummingbird back to health. So the love of animals and all little creatures just reverberates throughout all of my books. My books are the Roaming the States book series. And because of my love of little animals and creatures that was kind of formed in me at such a young age, I've made sure that all of that is, of course, in all of my books. Now, when we moved to Mexico when I was about 4, I am of Mexican heritage. And when we moved back to the United States, I was about almost 13. I had a real hard time with English. I could speak Spanish fluently, and my English was not too great. So I struggled a little bit in school with learning the words and how to spell and read and write and all that. So I was homeschooled, but it was all done, of course, at home. And so it was very different because, my mom could speak Spanish and explain to me in Spanish. So then I was able to do it. So when I moved to the United States, it was very, so I understand people who move here and can't quite get a hang of the language just because I was there too. And in my books, I make sure that I have pronunciations of really hard words because I remember how hard it was learning how to pronounce words in English. Now, my books are also available in Spanish. And of course, I did that because I wanted a broader audience to be able to enjoy the books that I have.
All right. Well, what made you decide to get into writing in the first place?
That's so funny because I would have never thought that doing books or a book author or anything like that would be something that I would do. It never crossed my mind. And what happened one night, me and my husband were talking. It was after our granddaughter was born. And I said, it makes me really sad that she'll never know how I was raised because the chances of her going, deep into the jungle are really, really thin when she just grows up and has an adventure streak in her. And he said, honey, you should really, write a book. And you should have a character based off our granddaughter and call her Renny. And that is the birth of Renny. And within 24 hours, I had written the first book.
Okay, so for the listeners who don't have an adventure streak in them, let them know, really what it is like, growing up and being actually really raised in the jungle.
Mm-hmm. So when we first moved down to the Zona Maya, they had not really ever seen anybody lighter skinned or anything. And so when me and my sister, we're little kids and we're walking around and they're touching us and, pulling our hair because they'd not seen hair, like ours. And it was just complete, having to learn the culture and having to learn the language and having to come together. And especially as a kid, because, you're playing hide and go seek, you're wanting to make friends, you're wanting to, do all these fun things. And if you can't speak to them, then we've got a problem. And so at a very young age, me and my sister both slowly began to learn not only Spanish, but we learned Mayan Indian. And we could speak Mayan for quite a while. And of course, it's such a very difficult language to learn. And it's been, 40 something years since I've spoken. I can still understand some of it. I cannot speak any of it anymore. But we made some long lasting relationships. I still have friends down in the village of Senor, where I was raised. And my brother, actually, when he came down, he met a Mayan young lady and they got married, and they have been married, I want to say, almost 40 years. And they have 2 children, and they still live down in the jungle. They come out and visit us here in the United States occasionally, but that's home to them, is the village of Senor. And they have a wonderful ministry that they do down there called Zona Maya Missions Ministry, where they do all kinds of cool things for the Mayan people. They do, things for the kids and do readings, and they, read books to the kids and bring, books to them, and all kinds of really fun things to the different villages that are, down in Senor, because they just recently got, electricity, and they just recently got phones, and they just recently got all these, things that we've had here for, for years and years and years. They have just recently gotten all those things. And so it's fun to kind of see, how it was when we were there as opposed to how it is now that they're there. And the Village of Senor is, I want to say, probably most known now. Of course, it wasn't popular when we were down there, because this is the late 70s, early 80s. But now it's known for the agua azul that's there. It's like a body of water, and it's clear blue. It's gorgeous, and people come from all over just to be able to go swim in that agua azul. And on the other side are caiman, which are related to like alligators. And so you don't want to go to this particular side of the water. You want to stay on this side. And that's why it's always good to get a Mayan Indian guide to take you, because they know their land like the back of their hand.
Okay, so kind of tell us where this jungle is, where you grew up. We're familiar with places like Mexico City, Tijuana, stuff like that, but kind of let the listeners know who might not know where this place is.
You got it. So the Yucatan jungle is going to be almost to Guatemala. So we are talking way, way, way down in Mexico, way past everything else. It's almost to the very tip where Guatemala meets the border of Mexico. The Yucatan is going to be right in that area. It's very close to about 2 hours, 2.5 hours away on a bus, 2.5 hours away from Cancun. So a lot of people that go to the Zona Maya get there by going to Cancun, and then they'll go to Chichen Itza and all the local places to see the Mayan temples and all that. And that's closer to civilization, because where the village is actually in the Yucatan jungle, you are going in the jungle to get there. So even though, what we would consider a road here is not necessarily what they have for a road to get to the village there. It's very, you got to have some 4-wheel drive to get there. I'll just say that.
Okay. Well, tell us about your biggest influences when it comes to writing. Who influences you to do what you do?
So whenever I started on this journey of writing, and I want to say this for everybody, if you're, in the third part of your life, you're never too old, to start something new, to learn something new, to discover that, you don't have to just stick with what you've been doing for the past 30 years. You can, go and learn something new and make something fun of it. And that's exactly what I did. I had done a lot of promoting and social media managing and all that kind of stuff for years and years, and it just burned me out. And when this came along, it reinvigorated me to want to connect with people and want to talk to people and want to share about my books and want to do something that's different. And I hear a lot of people my age. I'm 50, and I hear people say, "Oh, well, I'm too young, or I'm too old, or I don't have time, to start something new. It'll take too long, or this, that, and the other." And the truth of the matter is that I am having more fun now doing this than I ever have doing anything else, because it is fulfilling. It is so much fun to see the little kids' eyes light up when they hear about an animal that they've maybe only seen on TV, or when they hear about, a state that they've always wanted to go and visit, or it's their state and they're so excited because I'm talking about stuff that they know that they've learned in school. And so if the one thing that I could, put out there to people is, you're never too old. You're really not. You're not too old to go after something that makes you feel happy. You're not too old to, if you've been doing something for forever and ever, you can change, and you can, learn something new, and you can teach an old dog new tricks, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to make.
So, kind of give us a little background or history on the Mayans, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So the Mayan Indian people, they were the first ones really to be in that area, in that part of Mexico, and they ruled for a very, very long time. There was a movie about them not too long ago called Apocalypto, and it's very, very accurate to the area of the people. Now, one thing that most Americans, I guess, don't understand about the Mayan culture or Mayan Indian is that the language is so diverse. So it depends on the area that you're in as to the language that they're going to speak. So they all will have, it's like a blanketed, you call it Mayan, but depending on where they're located, they'll all speak a little bit different from each other. And so that, I guess it's kind of similar to us here, in the States. I'm originally from Texas, so I have a really, really, Texas slang, and I have a very thick accent. I'm sure your listeners are like, boy, that lady's must be from the South. Yes, I am. I am from the South. I'm from Texas. Born there, and then whenever we moved out from Mexico, that's where that's where I went to high school, was in Texas, and so that's where the thick accent comes from. Now, the Mayan people, they still are tribes. They still have places that it's Mayan land where you have to get permission if you're wanting to go and do photography or anything like that. There are some that it's you have to get permission, very similar to here with the American Indian land, where they own the land, and so you have to get permission to do certain things. But a lot of people, I guess, from the Apocalypto movie, just assumed that there were no more Mayans, but that's not true. That the Mayan people, the Mayan bloodline, is still alive today. I've got a niece and a nephew that have children now, and it's just and the legacy just continues. So the Mayan Indian people are still around. They are the ones that built the pyramids in Chichen Itza and all those locations down in Mexico where you see those grand. They look like those temples from Egypt, the pyramids. Same that kind of construction, and that's of course the Mayan people. They have been there for a long, long time, and they're still there now.
Let's take a quick break. Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
Okay, so tell us about your books. Tell us where we can get them and tell listeners what they can expect when they read them.
All right. So my books are all available on Amazon. You can also get my books from my website, www.rennyroo.com, and that's RYNNIEROO. You can also find my books on Audible because not everybody, especially little kids, can flip through a book or maybe, don't understand it or they're too young to read. And the target audience for my book is 3 to 7. Those are the ones that seem to really enjoy it the most. And so I made sure that I have Audible books available for my audience so that they can get a book and then have the child have the Audible where they can, read along. And I have a little voice actress that does the voices for me. Her name is Emmy Orr, and she is absolutely fantastic. She's 9 years old, and she brings Renny Roo to life. She is just amazing, just a fantastic little girl. And for the Kansas book, her and her 4-year-old sister do the voices of Renny Roo and Tater Tot. Now, the book of Renny Roo's Adventures focuses on a kangaroo that has a big giant bow in her hair, and she invites the reader to go roaming the states. And we are going to do all of the states in the United States. So far, we have Texas, Kansas, Arkansas, Alabama, Minnesota, Yucatan, and towards the end of this month, I'm going to be releasing the Zona Maya. Now, those last two ones, the Yucatan and the Zona Maya, those, of course, are a little more biographical because they talk more about where I was raised. And I wanted to throw those in there for the kids. And what has been so amazing about that has been a lot of feedback about the Yucatan book, where little kids would tell me, I've been there, I've been to Cancun, I know where you're talking about, I know what the Caribbean is, and it gets the kids talking about things in their world. So it just broadens and opens up their little minds to be able to understand that there is more than just what's going on here in the United States. My books also introduce children to the Mayan Indian language. I do have a couple of pages in my books that kind of teach the kids the words of the Mayan Indian language and how to say them. And I just think that, again, teaching kids a broader spectrum of, the world around them makes us all better. And I think that it, helped me have a better perspective of the world around me, because I know that it's not just here. I know that there are people all over, and I want to share that with the children. I want them to be excited when they read about Renny Roo's next adventure. Where's she going to go next? And we talk about the little animals in my books, but the most intriguing part that children love about my books is that every book talks about prehistoric animals and dinosaurs. I am a huge dinosaur fan. I love the history of dinosaurs. I love prehistoric animals and learning about them. And wouldn't you know, little kids do too. And so we connect on that issue. When I go to schools and do readings, the children absolutely love telling me what their favorite dinosaur is, what they've learned, how they pronounce it. And it's just it has opened up so much because the little kids love it. And of course, that's what inspires me to write more and to continue on this journey of writing about the states, is the excitement that I get whenever I go into a school just to be able to talk to the kids.
Well, tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
All right. So I've got quite a few things happening. And if anybody wants to join in on any of my social media, they are welcome to, because I am all over the place. We have coming up here in December, and where I'm located in Manhattan, Kansas, we have a event that's going to be happening at the Manhattan, Kansas Hy-Vee. On December 14th, we are doing a Santa and his reindeer. And of course, I have been invited to come, so I'm going to be there. And if any of your listeners come and tell me that they, heard me on your podcast or anything like that, if they let me know, I will give them a free download to one of the Audible books.
Well, that's interesting that you live in Manhattan, Kansas, because I lived in Junction City. I stayed there for like 3 years. I'm in Wichita now.
Yes, I did. I saw that. I saw that you were in Wichita, and I thought, man, that's really cool. And I was going to ask you about that beforehand and totally got sidetracked, but I did not know that. So how did you like living in Junction City?
I really didn't, because it wasn't anything to do. But then once I moved out of there, then I started checking out stuff on social media. Like, man, I wish I would have had access to this information when I lived there.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm originally from Louisiana.
Oh, very cool. I love Louisiana. Been there several times. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so listeners can keep up with everything that you're up to. Throw out your contact info.
Okay. All right. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me, they sure can. They can reach me at, of course, my website. They can reach me on Instagram at Renny Rue's Adventures. They can also reach me on Facebook, Renny Rue's Adventures, there as well, except that it's added with the author page is added at the end of it. But when you'll see me and you'll know, oh, that's the lady with the kangaroo and the parakeet. And that's how they'll find me. But they can also shoot me over an email if they'd like to. And of course, it is rrakidbooks@gmail.com.
All right. We'll close us out with some final thoughts. Maybe if there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
All right. So the one last thing that I want to kind of just say is, parents, caregivers, aunts, uncles, encourage your little ones to read. Encourage them to pick up a good book. It's going to broaden their little minds. It's going to help them learn. It's going to bring in vocabulary words that they maybe not would have heard before had it not been for that book. So this Christmas season, if you possibly can, look into getting your kids some books. They've got enough toys. My goodness, most kids have enough toys. But, a book is the gift that just keeps on giving, because they can open it up and just escape into a good book anytime that they want to. And whether it's my book or somebody else's book, that part, I really don't care. I just want to get kids reading. It's helped me, and I think that it's important. It's important that children read, whether it's being read to, like I said, through an Audible. There are also tons of read along accounts on YouTube if you'd like to check those out. There's where all you have to do is just sit your child down and you've got somebody who reads them books if they can't read for themselves. But get your children reading. It's important, and it helps everybody. It'll help you, and it'll help your children too.
Absolutely, ladies and gentlemen, and check out Jane Johnson's book. Follow, rate, review, share this to as many people as possible. Jane has an interesting story and an interesting history. Jump on your favorite podcast app, leave us a review, follow us, check out the show, share it. If you have any guest or suggestion topics, Curtis Jackson 1978 at att.net is the place to send them. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Jane, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Curtis. I so much appreciate it.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.